As has become their habit, protesters are too busy shooting cops and lighting Louisville on fire to deal with the myths that have come to surround the Breonna Taylor shooting, because contrary to what leftist rioters scream in the streets and scrawl all over their cardboard signs, they aren't actually interested in justice or in making our system better so we can avoid these kinds of problems in the future. If they were, they'd tell the truth, but they don't. So we're going to do it for them. Here are 4 myths about the Breonna Taylor case that the left wants you to believe, and why the truth is all that matters. On March 13th, 26-year-old Breonna Taylor was shot 5 times after police officers executed a raid on her apartment in the middle of the night. Taylor was an EMT with no known criminal history who seemed to have her life in order, so naturally, her death raised some legitimate questions. Questions that were immediately drowned out by screams of racism and the sound of gunfire aimed at the cops. And in all of the noise, the story was so bungled, so misreported that no one could make heads or tails of what had actually happened, and people started believing the lies. For example, myth number 1, police were operating on a no-knock warrant. That might have been the narrative for months, but it's actually not true. Police had originally obtained a no-knock warrant from a judge to raid Taylor's apartment, but that warrant was changed to a knock and announce warrant before they ever even showed up, just after midnight. Police and witnesses say they pounded on the door for about half a minute and identified themselves as cops before using a battering ram to break into the home. Now, you can argue that half a minute's not a lot of time for a sleeping person to wake up, get their wits about them, and answer the door while somebody's violently beating on it. It also stands to reason that just because somebody says they're the cops doesn't mean that you would automatically believe them. All of those are good points. But it wasn't a no-knock warrant, and that matters. Myth number 2, police simply got the wrong apartment. Again, not true. When all of this kicked off, we were told the cops showed up to serve a no-knock warrant and simply busted in the wrong door like a bunch of morons. They didn't. They were at Taylor's apartment because they had reason to believe that another man, who Taylor had previously dated, was at the residence. That guy, Jamarcus Glover, was a known criminal, a drug dealer, and was wanted on drug trafficking charges. Taylor's address was on his bank account, and he'd reportedly been having packages delivered to her home. The cops were looking for him, and they had her address. They got the right door, just not the right person. Myth number 3. Police walked in and opened fire on Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, while they were sleeping. Again, not true. Walker said both he and Taylor woke up when they heard pounding on the door. He claims that in all the confusion, they thought perhaps somebody was trying to break in or that Taylor's ex-boyfriend was attacking them. Walker said he never heard the police identify themselves, and nobody can prove that he's lying. But by the time police had busted in, Walker was prepared with his legally owned firearm and began shooting, hitting one of the cops in the leg. So they returned fire. Taylor was struck 5 times, and she died at the scene. Myth number 4. Police shot Breonna Taylor to death because she was black. Now let me state this as clearly as possible because this riff is the dumbest. Just because Taylor was black does not mean she was shot because she was black. There is no evidence whatsoever that the police willfully and intentionally shot her to death or that they did so because of the color of her skin. They weren't at her apartment because she was black. They were there because she dated a drug trafficker. Now, her death raises a crap load of issues, but the notion that these cops decided to shoot her in the middle of the night in a split-second decision because they're a bunch of racist bigots isn't one of them. There is no more evidence that the cops shot her because she was black than there is that Walker shot at them because they were cops. There are about 1,000 legitimate questions that we can and should ask about this case, and that is okay. Anyone who truly believes in small government knows it's important to hold power accountable. So why was this raid executed in the middle of the night? Why weren't the cops wearing body cameras? How did they obtain such a specific warrant to raid an apartment that didn't even belong to the man they were looking for? And why were they so certain that he'd be there in the first place? Had Jamarcus Glover already been arrested? And if so, why hadn't anyone bothered to tell the cops who then showed up at Taylor's home looking for him? What medical aid, if any, did they give her after she was shot? Is this really the most effective way to apprehend a drug trafficker while also preserving the safety of innocent people and of police officers? And what happens when a cop's legal right to kick in your door conflicts with your legal right to defend yourself in your home against an unknown intruder? These are all legitimate questions, and they deserve answers. both to protect innocent people and to protect police officers. But see, in order to do that, the facts have to matter. The truth has to matter. It's impossible to answer these questions when the story is immediately misreported and those lies clog up the air for months. When leftists automatically take to the streets to burn down buildings and assault cops and light the town on fire, when justice turns into vengeance, and when everything is immediately labeled racist without evidence, simply because certain perpetually victimized people are looking for a reason to feel targeted. You're not looking to solve problems and save lives, you're looking to stay pissed off. And you'll find a reason every time, because at the end of the day, Breonna Taylor doesn't really matter to you. She was an EMT. You think she'd feel honored by people shooting cops and throwing Molotov cocktails in the streets? She'd be the one helping the officers y'all just shot, but you don't care. This is about you being mad and having a reason to blow stuff up. You no more care about Breonna Taylor's life than the cop who fired willy-nilly into her patio door. You don't care about truth. And you're not interested in having a fact-based conversation that could actually help solve problems in our justice system, which tells me that at the end of the day, you don't really want to. And that's your Reality Check, America. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page, like us on Facebook and Twitter, and stay sane out there.